Hello, and welcome to Association Transformation. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We are an international conversation that continues on discussing association evolution, the challenges, the innovations, the excitement that is the nonprofit industry. I'm excited to welcome back my co-host, Andrew Chamberlain. And
hi, Lise. How you doing?
I'm good. Sorry, I stumbled over your name. That was
Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. I mean, last week you forgot what company I worked for, so it's totally fine. We've only been doing this for 7 months. It's fine. It's okay. It's okay. It's fine.
Well, thanks for coming back. Sorry,
Yeah,
this
no,
is so
thanks.
emotionally painful, but thanks for even coming back. Today's a topic that may be painful for some, but I know we are excited, and our guest is excited to join us. Graeme, and I'll give the formal introduction here in a minute, but Graeme is an Association Transformation listener, a fan, and he partook in the CFO topic that we covered back in 2020. I think with Kevin Madden, it aired September, October. And he's been pounding on our door to talk more CFO topics.
Oh, no pressure, Graeme, no pressure. But we're basically turning our microphones off for the next 20 minutes.
Well, let's get him his formal intro. We are excited today to have with us Graeme Copestake, the director of Crossley Third Sector. And, I think it's important to know that there are people in this nonprofit sector who care about finances, reserves, risk, KPIs of the financial nature. I mean, this is an important sector of nonprofit management that we probably don't give enough attention to. And Graeme has been lobbying for more financial topics, and we're excited to have him. I'm excited he's excited. Graeme, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. How can I follow that introduction?
You can't. It's just you bigged him up so much. Then I don't know how you're going to follow that.
All right. Well, hold on. Let me lower the bar. Graeme's an accountant.
All right. Say no more. Right, there we go.
I'm now on lift off. I can now lift off from that kind of tone of.
Graeme will likely never want to come back. So let's just have the best show we can have. He's already regretting this,
isn't he? He's thinking, oh my God. Right. Yeah.
There's subtitles on the screen, guys, you can't see, which basically says calm him down, get him excited, and just hopefully get him through the next half an hour. So we're doing well. We're doing good here. We're doing good.
No, seriously, though, we are glad to have you. And it was, to be honest, it was one of our most popular episodes of 2020. Yep. Was the CFO, oh no, discussion of everything that brought the financial urgency, the financial risk, the management of reserves. I mean, all those things became hot topics in 2020 as disruption impacted every aspect of nonprofit management. So you're not alone. That episode brought a lot of response. Kevin Madden was a great guest and put things in some important perspectives. So
he was great. He was great on that. And that kind of inspired me to sort of pound on your door, as you put it. Sorry, I cut across you.
No, please. I wondered as you were listening to it, what more were you looking for? What else did you want to share?
I wanted to just echo again. Kevin had a presence about him that he was very calm, but it had resonance of what happened during the last 12 months. So we are literally, I think, days away from the anniversary in the UK of being locked in our individual bedroom cells. And Kevin gave a very clear explanation about how strategy needs to be the bedrock, and then the strategy should be the thing we really hang on to when we're going to make some quite serious decisions. And I found myself with I think nearly 20 or so clients that we handhold, whether it's processing transactions all the way through to giving FD support. Our first port of call was to do exactly what Kevin was doing, which was a calm, still voice in basically saying, what are the core things, guys, that we need to do to get through this? And he held on to strategy, which I think was a really important thing. And the other great thing, obviously, was there was a CFO taking control and being listened to. And I think he did a lot of listening as well. So there are some quite interesting hallmarks there about the start of this conversation, about where we all found ourselves and then what roles we played. Now, Andrew, obviously the first person to talk about this in terms of what good governance does to enable that situation. But a lot of the boards that I sit on, that good governance was an equal part in allowing CFOs like myself to actually have a platform and speak into that. So there were a lot of interjoining things that made survival for all my clients an absolute, almost a certainty. So yeah, that's the kind of starting point for me.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll give Kevin Madden a little more love here. He was a great guest, and I know my favorite part of that conversation was when he was talking about those reserves, not reserves, those revenue streams that had served as, he called it deodorant. The revenue streams that had served as deodorant, covering the stink of other areas that weren't carrying their weight, that, you know, that were not sustainable or soluble in other areas. And the loss of those revenue streams, the lack of that deodorant, had caused some turned up noses at the new financial reality of the organization. Andrew, you don't like how I'm taking this?
I think this is an awful metaphor. I think it's terrible.
You do? I thought it was appropriate at the time, and it stuck with me. More importantly, it stuck with me. It was something that I remembered. And I'm not, you know, the CFO. I'm not, you know, financially minded in that sense, but it stuck with me, and I thought it was an important analogy at the time.
Actually, it was, because I wrote down the words politicized. How can the conversation be politicized? And obviously, we jest about deodorant and covering up nasty smells, but there is a reality to the conversations around the board where everyone speaks from an unconscious bias, whether they like it or not. And everyone's got their little pet topic that they like to promote or champion. And I think one of the things that we did, we went straight to a business continuity model. But rather than just substituting profit, we absolutely made sure that strategic objectives and an eye on the reserves enabled us to do the things we needed to do. So we did have to prioritize. You know, we did have to look at our strategy and say what gives. But the great thing was we didn't just jump to, and this is something that I'll probably ask our listeners to think about, is did they find themselves jumping to, let's just save this financial year? Or did they dig out their dusty kind of copies of the strategic plan and say, we're in this for 3 years, we're still going to get there. Are we okay with making a loss this year? Are we okay with dumping this particular smelly product just to keep us going? So I think what gave, was it the strategy, or was it we need to make sure we're making a profit? And I think there's a distinction between putting strategy first and remembering what we're there for over a 3 to 5 year period, and emergency coverage. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think it was not good for certain periods when the risk was just so unknown. But I think one of the clear things that I think I encouraged everyone to do was to tear up their budgets and start again and reforecast. So that again, that depoliticized the subject and put everyone into what are our core principles? What are we going to stick with?
Yeah, I love that you're talking mindful, patient strategy. You know, last year was so much about pivot, this agility, you know, this, and there was a lot of reaction, a lot of unthought, you know, reactionary reaction. And, you know, strategic plans are intended to give you an outline over in 3 years, 2 years. I mean, sometimes it's arbitrary, but, you know, it's supposed to help you avoid reaction. And you also mentioned something about abandonment. You know, purposeful abandonment is a strategy that I know I encourage most of my clients, if not all, to adopt last year. What can you use this year in these circumstances as an excuse to abandon? Where do the numbers no longer justify the pet projects? And how can this work to our advantage? But don't react, don't pivot. I mean, that just sets you up to chase your tail. Focus on your strategy.
That's really interesting. I was on a finance committee last week, and we were still invited to look at scenario building for a budget for next year. and one of the constituents on the committee gave a very clear example of repivoting quite quickly. And one of the things that struck me was that how quickly, when you abandon all of your strategic plan just to save the pounds and the pennies, do you actually abandon what a strategy is all about, which is a reflection of your values and where you're going? So I think it brings into sharp focus how committed we are and how good the strategic plan was in the first place. So I think there's an adjustment of time rather than, as you say, that keyword abandonment. I think reserves, the building up of reserves, is a topic in itself, because the first question I usually get asked is, have we got 6 months worth of overhead coverage to shut down? And I tend to put my head in my hands a little bit, because I think that's not what reserves are for. Even in the last 12 months, probably a tiny percentage used that buffer and got out of it. Most of them were looking at their reserves thinking, what can we use them for the most vulnerable income streams? And that was the bit that I was punching the air with Kevin last time, because this risk-based understanding of constantly looking at your revenue streams and seeing what value are they really contributing to my strategy. So I think going back to the hallmarks of a good CFO are about the good hallmarks of a good board. Are we listening to the CFO? And is the CFO listening to the rest of the operational team and really understanding it? So if I see a set of financials that don't have non-financial drivers, then all we're stating is this is what happened in the past. One of the things we really need to see on our associations' dashboards are what are the key things that are driving the numbers. Looking at the numbers once they've happened, everyone can pop a champagne cork or, cry into the handkerchief. It's too late. I think we need to be looking at those trends much earlier on. It's that's going to inform the nature of the success of the strategy we're on. And that's where the tweaks need to happen. So I think there's a much more collaborative approach needed. And that's what I think was successful in the last 12 months, particularly. Obviously, as we stand here on the 2nd and 3rd of March, wherever the date is today.
But do you not think, well, no, let me rephrase this. I think you've been fortunate in that you clearly are working. No, I think the boards that you work with are fortunate that they're working with you. And I think that you're seeing, I think you've witnessed the good and the bad, haven't you, in the last 12 months? You've seen where those organizations who have got really good, for want of a better phrase, robust education around the board in terms of what constitutes a strategic board, what constitutes a profitable relationship with the CFO, with the with the executive team, and what we need to do to nurture that relationship and include all relevant parties in the strat planning process. But I'm not sure I have experienced the joy of in the last 12 months of working with boards who were able to draw on their reserves to, as you say, focus on the vulnerable areas and not just survive is the wrong word, but respond to circumstances in a constructive way. I feel like the last 12 months in particular, and actually I think even more so in the last 6 months since we recorded that session with Kevin, I feel like the lack of investment in education at board level, professional development at board level is really startling me, and it's really worrying me. And I don't just mean about strategic planning, but I mean about the whole fiduciary piece and the financial interaction at the strategic and the generative level. I feel is just distinctly missing. I think that's why I say they're fortunate that they've got you working with them, because I think obviously you get it and you're ensuring that they understand it. But too often I'm working with boards who are scrabbling to even understand balance sheets, never mind be be strategic in their financial understandings. Is that fair of me?
I think that's very fair, actually. I was just joining the dots, actually, because so far I've said working with Graeme is fantastic. It's like working with Disney. Obviously, life wasn't all like that. So you've grounded me a little bit. So cue to the listener, the fluffy stuff's done. We're now going to move into the challenging segment. I think there were 2 or 3 clients that we thought going into this they were already in distress.
Yes.
And I think they were in, and I'm just now thinking about that governance piece that you were just owning up to there. One of the things that struck me earlier on was Liza said the word mindful, and I think this idea of a board understanding where they are. Some of the best boards we work with are mindful all over the place. So those boards that I think are succeeding, they are working on their inclusion, they're working on their diversity, and they are speaking truth into power, where previously they would have thought this is somebody else's problem. So increasingly now we're talking about the impact, the real impact of racism, of sexism still within our boardrooms, and we're not as polarized as maybe some of the top corporates, but it is still present because it's still localized in our setting. And I think those clients that are embracing the wider conversation about bias and about inclusion and about diversity, they're the ones actually that are succeeding. Now, I've picked obviously on a couple of things that are really topical, but I think using the word earlier from mindful, they're just becoming more open. So I think there's a bit of a correlation there between those that people who are stuck somewhere in 1950 to 1970, they will fail. They will fail. I suppose some of the other success factors is we do work in a sector where if you have a strong product offer, then individually this has probably been worse than anything, obviously, that we can remember, because we all feel isolated. So flocking to and being part of a group that associates with our values is definitely going to be an attractive proposition. So I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that associations naturally were going to be successful, but there are some who have done it better than others.
Graeme, you talk about the numbers representing and being a snapshot of the past. So if we have clients and we have associations that are looking to learn from last year and yet adopt a certain amount of financial foresight, how are you advising people to change their KPIs or evaluate those past numbers differently? Those numbers from a year that hopefully will never be replicated and a year of, unheard of disruption. How can you use the numbers and financials from these last 12 months to position your organization differently or adopt that financial foresight that you were talking about?
That's a really great question, actually. I think there's 3 things you can do. One is about don't forget. The second one is about it does play an important part in the trend. And the third one is what I call chunking. So we'll leave the chunking one to the end because it's
the exciting one.
Serious. So the size of this issue, I think it will surprise us. The impact when we look back, if we don't record it and we don't fit it in with our trend analysis and we don't really understand the magnitude of it, we will invent stories. I had to stop myself earlier on from saying, since the Second World War, since the Blitz, we associate anecdotes that are blown up and disproportionate and not true. So I think understanding the size of the impact and really being honest about it at a very micro level is a piece of work that once you've done it, you can then understand how you're going to bounce back. The don't forget aspect is really understanding what impact it had. And this is where I go beyond myself as just an accountant. We have to go back to the KPIs and say the so what question. Our numbers are down, so what? And I think event management has probably been one of the most tricky areas about how people are doing events. If we don't understand really why the numbers changed, then we can come up with some really false conclusions about how we can bounce back to event management. So, for example, was the decline in event management because corporate sponsors were a little bit uncertain? Well, we're already seeing bounce back in areas where sponsors do exist. A different type of corporate sponsor exists. So bounce back and understand. And don't forget what really happened. Don't just invent a narrative that is, oh, it was a crap time. Well, it wasn't. Before I came on, I just read the headline for the budget, and in amongst there was a really weird statistic which didn't fit with my unconscious narrative, which was service sector has bounced back the strongest since 2016. So I've got to go away and research that and understand why I'm still telling myself that everywhere's crap. It's not. So don't forget, it's the second one. The third one is the de-chunking. I don't know what that means in terms of the word, but the way
I had such excitement wanting to just know what it was.
Yeah, I've just made it up for this podcast. You guys have that's my kid.
Trademark that. Just trademark that right now.
Yeah, there'll be a meme for this. Basically, break it down into smaller chunks. Break it down into a granular level you possibly can, because there will be so much more learning than the numbers suggest. And included in that breaking it down, go back to the decisions you made that led to you either abandoning that cost, abandoning that income stream. Track it back all the way to get forensic. Go all the way back to your board minutes and find out how you were informed that made you take that decision to stop doing that. Because equally, we're going to have that in situations where how do we go back? Again, we're having on an SMT call this morning with a client, and we were talking about, well, how are we going to go back? And they're UK based, and they've got offices all around the country. And what I was hearing was this particular office loves working from home. This particular office, some of them get into London, but they're scared about the commute. And we're going to forget some of the decisions we make unless we really break it down and understand. Because very quickly, the boards will then lose a real understanding from what decisions were made. So I think this set of KPIs is going to be this year that we've just gone is going to be the most interesting, and it will reveal more about our intrinsic decision making processes, because all the lockdown has really done has just brought our shadow side and our caricatures of ourselves into. It hasn't invented anything. It's just played into all those things that are already there. So this might be a good way of digging deeper into the KPIs as a bit more understanding of the behaviour of the way organisations work. And that's where CFOs and CEOs and SMTs and boards, if they're really open-minded and have the right people on them and are diverse, then they can be asking themselves some really challenging questions rather than just saying it was a crap year.
No, I wholly agree with you that I think it's how organizations are going to come out of this, what they've learned, and their commitment to the decision-making process that they've gone through, and their projections for the future that will really, I don't know, pave the way for greater successes. It's
really interesting. I was talking to a CEO yesterday, and we'd invited an investment specialist to come along because we were prepping our particular finance committee to talk about their revised ethical framework, and we were thinking about, for their investments going forward, how we're going to respond positively to climate change. And we said, the investment advisor said, "Do you want me to come along to your finance committee?" And the CEO kind of said, "Well, we've got a bit of a problem because at the moment we're trying to get everyone to collaborate." So thinking earlier about what Andrew said, the discussion really wasn't about, the process really wasn't about, are we going to choose the right ethical framework?
Mm-hmm.
As a facilitator for the CEO, she was more concerned that she was going to get her board, her committee, to collaborate in the first place. So going back to the word education that Andrew mentioned earlier on the podcast, I still think we bring, or board members bring so much of themselves. They don't leave their hats, their technically expertise hats at the door, and they come in and they posture and they bring what they know, but they don't have an expectation of, or any, that inquisitive nature that they should have. Is that lack of inquisitive nature, again through diversity, lack of diversity, into the position, and then go, right, what's new? What am I going to listen to? So I think that's part of the problem.
So do you think, so within that context, it's really interesting that you mentioned, the whole piece around the climate change. Do you think we're going to see more, do you think we're going to see over the next sort of 12 months, more consideration of the triple bottom line from membership boards? Do you think they're, because we're talking a lot, I don't know how much you know about the work we're doing with the IAL around the kind of social justice, environmental peace, Ignite, etc. And I'm curious, as because all the skill set, all the behaviors that you're describing that we need anyway at a board level to be really impactful in not just not just financial strategy, but full organizational generative thinking. But do you think we're going to see more boards focusing on triple bottom line are they capable yet in terms of the skill sets and the approaches that they have? Or is the culture just so ingrained in the membership sector that it's just going to be too much of a challenge for them?
I think challenge is a key word. This again is not, we shouldn't lay the responsibility at the door of, I think it's Mark Carney now, who's the ambassador for the UN he was obviously governor of the Bank of England, and obviously all eyes are on COP 26 in Scotland towards the end of the year. There are two things at play. We could put the responsibility for the success of this over the next 12 months at the hands of, well, the big corporates need to do more. But I think it goes back to what you said earlier, which is it's the education of the boards to know how to make decisions, how to be inquisitive about the information before them. So it just so happens this investment advisor was telling me on Monday morning a couple of things. She's choosing stocks where her 5-point sustainable framework, they can't right now say yes, can't say no to portfolios if they can spot that the companies themselves are on a journey. Because people like BP, for example, I think the CEO of BP has a bodyguard because they can't mention the word fossil fuels because the discussion is so politicized. What our boards at our level need to understand is that we will be on a journey, and for these lead protagonists to divest from fossil fuels, they are going on a journey themselves. I'll give you a good example on that. So I think it's Rio Tinto. You'd think about those as mining, and you'd probably then say, we don't want to deal with Rio Tinto. But if I said to you, they are probably one of the our best hopes for producing the materials that go into batteries that are going to go into electric cars, you'd have a different view. So it's not so much about, do we know the tech, do we know who the companies are? It's just going through that process of listening and our expectations. So going back to the broader point about our boards, the challenge is the same challenges we've had before. It's just a different example. So I think it's going to be a huge challenge.
Well, board inquisitiveness and that financial mindfulness that we have to hold ourselves accountable for, as well as our board members. It's amazing how those issues that a CFO juggles, those financial markers that have such an intersectionality of mission, finance, social responsibility, and purpose. I mean, we're talking about some pretty heady stuff here, and I'm excited and thankful that Graeme has joined us today. I mean, between financial foresight and a commitment to strategy, let alone chunking. I mean, I can see that be not only a hashtag, but on a t-shirt somewhere. So thank you.
With Graeme's face above it, is it? No.
Thank you, Graeme, so much for continuing the CFO conversation. I know Kevin Madden will be proud, and you now are both in our CFO Hall of Fame. So thank you so much for bringing this conversation back to top of mind. And thank you so much for your time. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed our conversation. And if there's a podcast that you would like us to explore, if you would like to start pounding on our door every week like Graeme has, look what can happen. You can be a guest on Association Transformation as well.
There's an incentive.
We might need to get bodyguards, Andrew. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
But if you are interested, have a topic, have someone you think we should talk to, you can tweet us at Association Transformation or email us hello@yourconsort.com, and we'll draw upon your ideas, our expertise, and the association network abroad to put together the best conversation possible. So again, thanks for listening, and you can find Association Transformation wherever you get your podcasts. We encourage you to make us one of your favorites. And until next time, we say stay well and put your members and your mission first.
Association Transformation is brought to you in partnership between Consort Strategy and Brewer Pratt Solutions in support of the Institute of Association Leadership.